Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Richard Allinger of the Newburgh Theological Seminary, Department of Theology, Division of Church History and Religious Education. I am so happy that you have graced your home today and given me the privilege of actually being in your homes by tuning me in for lessons in church history. Now, what I would like to talk about before I get into the content of church history, if you remember the presidential election back in 2020, November 2020, on the election day, a TV evangelist who also was a local pastor in Richmond, Indiana, that's where he was born, died of COVID at 75 years old on election day, and all of the Christian television networks programmed his end time presentation of biblical prophecy on their programs. And because he died on election day at COVID, I was up here in Flint, Michigan, and I watched his funeral virtual because of COVID at the church. He was his local church. He was a pastor for years at like a Church of God Pentecostal type local church down close to where he was born in Richmond, Indiana. And the name of his television program, he was on the radio. I know that my church history programs were on 600 AM dial, WSNL Christian Talk Broadcasting Network from 5:30 to 6 on this AM radio dial here locally in Michigan. It usually broadcasts to Midland and Saginaw, Bay City, and Flint, and the surrounding areas. And then after my church history program from 5:30 to 6 in the evening, I was followed by Erwin Baxter's TV radio program was also on from 5 to 5:30. I remember for all of the year of 2020. So, and the reason I bring this up is because in Revelation chapter 19, verse 10 and 11, it says that the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. And this was the theme of his end time program on TV and radio. And what he was talking about was when it came to the hour in which Christ would return, I want to go to Matthew, I believe Matthew chapter 24, verse 16. And Jesus spoke to his disciples. They were wondering when Jesus was coming back, and this is what he said. In the Bible here, it says, now this is not a King James Version Bible. It's a Christian Standard Bible, so it might not word as a King James. But it says in Matthew chapter 24, verse 36, now concerning that day and hour, see that word hour? That's 60 minutes of time. And that hour, no one knows. Neither the angels of heaven, nor the Son, No one knows that hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, except the Father alone. Has the day of Noah were so, will the coming of the Son of Man will be. And see, so only the Father in heaven knows that hour. See, H-O-U-R, and that we're going to do a little short Bible study on that word hour, because that word hour takes us to Revelation chapter 6. It takes us to Revelation chapter 9 and Revelation chapter 18, that word hour. So we're going to look at that quickly. And see, now Erwin Baxter, on the program, around the time he was dying, he was talking about these 4 horses, and they had horsemen riding these 4 horses in Revelation chapter 6. There was a white horse, a red horse, a black horse, and a pale green horse, and the riders were riding them, and he was talking about that. And you can turn to Revelation chapter 6 and read more specifically about those 4 riders. And he was saying that if you had a spiritual ear, because Jesus in Revelation said, "Blessed are those who have the ear to hear." And so if you have a spiritual ear in the spiritual realm, you could actually, Erwin said, you could, he's actually a doctor too. He was really trained, Dr. Erwin Baxter, especially in eschatology. That's a theological word for things to come, if you have spiritual ears, you can hear, said Dr. Baxter, the 4 horsemen, the hoofs of the horses in the spiritual realm riding even right now in the earth, and what those 4 horsemen in their different colors meant. You can read that yourself. But to shed more light on what he in particularly was talking about, that word hour, I want you to write down Revelation chapter 9, verse 15, and I'll turn there. And he paralleled this verse with those horsemen riding. That is Revelation chapter 9, verse 15. And it says that 4 angels bound at the great, I've got to get my magnifying glass, at the great river Euphrates. So the 4 angels who were prepared for the hour, see, Revelation chapter 9 verse 15, prepared for the hour, H-O-U-R, hour, because he was saying that only Father God in heaven would know that hour. And here, this hour, he ran parallels to this verse, Revelation chapter 9 verse 15, that hour, day, month, and year were released to kill 1/3 of the human race. So Google says by 2050 it's projected that there'll be 9 billion people in the world. So if it happens between now and 2050, only the Father knows, that would be 3 billion people wiped out. And then he wanted us to also, with regard to that hour, only the Father knows. See, only the Father knows that year, that month, that day, that hour, H-O-U-R, when this event will happen, where third, in 60 minutes' time, a third of the Earth's population will be wiped out. It parallels with this verse here. And at the end of chapter 18, Revelation, at the end, turn to Revelation chapter 18, and the last three verses says, we're looking for that word hour again. Woe, 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 the great, whenever he says a word and repeats it three times, that means it's called theologically interpreting it to be a tritagion. It's a Greek word. He mentions it three times, like the Father in heaven and the living creatures at the throne of God, the sea of glass. They're always crying continually, holy, holy, holy. In other words, God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. They're not just holy, they are holy, holy, holy. And here it says, woe, in Revelation, at the last few verses of Revelation chapter 18 with regard to that word hour, it says, woe, 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 the great city where all those who have ships on the sea became rich from her wealth, for in a single hour, there's that word hour, in a 1 hour, H-O-U-R, 60 minutes of time, she was destroyed. Rejoice over her, heaven, and you saints, apostles, and you prophets.
Give me that, Richard. Let me see if I can clean it off for you.
Okay, can you read?
Give me this right here.
Can you just read that last verse?
No, give me your glass.
Oh,
give me your glass.
Okay.
And we'll clean it off for you.
Oh, okay, thank you. That'll make a difference. Yeah, I was really having trouble seeing. That'll make a difference. I was really that magnifying glass. I've got glaucoma, and I only have one eye. It says, thank you, Paul. It says, because the Father, the Son, and the Holy Person's three ghosts has pronounced on her the judgment. She passed on to you. Now that's that hour. See, something's going to happen in an hour of time, an event. So again, I'll repeat those verses if you want to refer to them. Revelation chapter 19, verse 10 and 11. The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is what Dr. Erwin Baxter was saying. And Revelation chapter 6 are the white, red, black, and pale green horses riding with horsemen. And if you have spiritual ears, you can hear their hoofbeats in the earth right now. And said Erwin Baxter. And then you have the other verses that I talked about was Revelation chapter 9, verse 15. There's 1 hour of which only God the Father knows that hour, not even the angels in heaven. And Revelation chapter 18, the last three verses, verses 19 through 20, that 1 hour. And so now that I've kind of said that, because this man was really the pillar of biblical prophecy and eschatology amongst everybody in the world. They tuned him in. He was on the internet everywhere in different languages. It's still his family is still carrying on the website, keeping it updated, and the TV programs and everything. And it wasn't really, it's no one's message. It was, it's the message. There's just one message of the Word, the Bible, and that's it, no matter who says it. But now that that's been said, for all of you, we all know who the Cassius, now is Cassius Clay still living? Paul, is Cassius Clay still living? Muhammad Ali? Well, see, Muhammad Ali, I heard, had Parkinson's disease, but he's still living. And what Muhammad Ali was to heavyweight boxing, this Dr. Irwin Baxter is to biblical prophecy in his presentations that he had, and he was the pillar when it came to communicating in an understandable way biblical prophecy. And I brought this up because not much has really been said about what he was talking about, but that's what I just shared with you is exactly what he was talking about and why his show was watched by at least 50 million people on TV networks, Christian network TV, if not more, because he's on the internet in different languages and had been for years. So now what I
passed away in 2016.
Yeah, he no, this one Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali died
in 2016.
How old was he?
I am not
2016.
Sure.
We have just found out by a real quick search that
74.
Muhammad Ali, otherwise always known as Cassius Clay, died in 2016. And at his last, they said he had Parkinson's disease, and he was 74. Okay, this Irwin Baxter was 75. The Bible says that in Psalms that if he's blessed, has 70 years, but by way of strength, he might live to be 80 or 90 or even 100. That's an extra blessing. But to even live to be 70, so Cassius Clay was blessed. And so was Irwin Baxter. They both lived to be in their 70s. And as you know, I think they say that the former President Donald Trump, I think he was the 45th president, is too old to think about running again. I think he's about 79 or 80. And they say that in this election coming up in 2022, November, the Dems are probably going to take a couple more Senate or House of Representatives seats, and with that, it'll be hard for the Republicans to get their candidates in. So now what I'm going to do is pick up with Dietrich Bonhoeffer right now. This is the cover of his book, Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Prophet. No, it says Bonhoeffer, pastor, martyr, prophet, and spy. He was a German theologian and Bible college teacher underground in Berlin, Germany, and other places in Germany too, during World War II. And he was destined to involve himself with an invisible network, secret network of even some of Hitler's generals to kill or assassinate Der Fuhrer, otherwise known as Adolf Hitler. And he got caught, and they put him in one of the concentration death camps. And I guess the last few months of his life, he was in solitary confinement, and he couldn't even see the light of day as they walked him to his death, and he was hung until dead. And the chaplain that saw it was still living in our time, and he said Bonhoeffer died well. He just bowed his head like Apostle Paul did when Paul's head was chopped off with a sword in a suburb of Rome. He wasn't martyred in Rome, but it was a suburb in Rome. But the Roman Catholic Church has erroneously claims that Paul was beheaded by the sword in Rome, but it wasn't the city Rome, because that would add validity to some of their I'd say erroneous claims about the chair of Peter, of which they say the Pope, who they believe is the king of the world, sits in. And we believe that's not true. And so with that being said, this is Bonhoeffer, and Bonhoeffer had a lot to say about the Roman Catholic Church. He went to Rome and actually visited. He was with the Pope on a Saturday when the Pope came out to talk to people, and Bonhoeffer said this Pope back in the 30s during the Nazi regime was kind of just cold and not very personable, and he wasn't impressed with the Pope back then. And but he says that the Roman Catholic Church sure had a hand in shaping Western civilization. So that's why you can't study history, especially church history, without studying all that. And that's in a lot of my previous church history programs and church history sessions that are archived on YouTube. Now, as you know, I'm coming live in all my programs from the Spectacle Productions satellite studio. This is a satellite studio of the Spectacle Productions. My program, some of my beginning programs were at the home of the Spectacle Production Studio, but this is a satellite studio with the big backdrop here with that red cross, and how the ages from eternity past to eternity future are kind of looked upon from the eyes of the eternal Father as dispensations of time, and that's called the Bible map back there behind my head. And continuing on the excerpts that I wanted to share with you on Dietrich Bonhoeffer's book, Pastor, Prophet, Martyr, and Spy, picking up where I had left off in previous sessions. If you board the wrong train, it is no use running along the corridor in the opposite direction. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. These were the words of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Again, if you board the wrong train, it is no use running along the corridor in the opposite direction. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Emerging from an April 1933 conference, the German Christian agreed together everything must now be synchronized under De Fuhr's leadership and under the idea of, this is a German word, Gleichschaltung, and the church way. Gleichschaltung is the German word for synchronization, and the church, the word for in German for church is Kirche, must lead the way. Soon after Hitler came to power, the Aryan paragraph took effect, resulting in the expulsion of all Jewish descent people that were Jews. This Aryan Nazi regime paragraph stated that all Jews of Jewish descent people would have to be exempt from civil service. In other words, the Nazi government would not expulsion of all Jewish descent people from the civil service. They didn't want them in the government at all. Eventually, it would lead to their exclusion from the church, and ultimately to their mass murders 1 week after passage of the Enabling Act. Hitler declared a boycott of Jewish stores across Germany. At first, Bonhoeffer even suggested convening a church council had been done in early church history at Nicaea and Chalcedon. He believed the Holy Spirit could speak and solve the problem if they behaved like the church. But he was mostly speaking to liberal theologians for whom the notions of a council, heresy, or schism seemed archaic. He was calling the church to behave like the church, but his declaration fell on deaf ears. At one point, Bonhoeffer began to see, now, just as I read that, and I'm sorry I can't read more with more cohesion. I don't like to sound fragmented in my communication to you, especially on the air. But remember that the Aryan paragraph was done by the Nazi regime to the expulsion of Jews and everything in Nazi Germany, and led to all of their deaths in the death camps of Buchenwald and Dachau and so on, Treblinka. And it was about 6 million after the war was over. They said in 1945 that the Nazi regime was responsible for having brought about the deaths of 6 million of the Jews in what they call the Jewish Holocaust of the 20th century, which was about 80, 90, 100 years ago now that we're in the 21st century. But now Bonhoeffer also wrote a statement that the church needs to be the church in Germany and in Europe. And like he was a theologian, a polished theologian and a Bible college teacher underground, and his paragraphs of writing was calling the church to come out of apostasy because the Third Reich had caused all of Martin Luther's Lutheran churches in Germany to apostatize and back up De Fuhrer and embrace the Me and Kauf, the writings of Adolf Hitler, instead of the Bible, and make Adolf Hitler Christ and supplant Christ in the hearts of mankind, especially in Germany. And so Bonhoeffer, who was in the resistance to this in the professing church, they called it the confessing church, tried to get the church out of its apostasy and backing up Nazi theology. And but the church wanted to, out of fear, I guess, stay loyal to Hitler. So the real church, quote, real church, unquote, Bonhoeffer was writing this to and telling them, you need to be the church. And if we really are the church, the Holy Spirit will help solve some of these problems. And that's what he wrote about. Don't confuse the two writings of, like, the Nazi regime wanted to expel the Jews in the Aryan paragraph, and like Dietrich Bonhoeffer wanted to, as a theologian in the Christian church, actually convene a ecumenical council and make statements that the church should be the church and not kowtow or cave into Nazism and Nazi theology. Now, at one point, Bonhoeffer, but everything Bonhoeffer was doing kind of like fell on deaf ears, it says. And Bonhoeffer began to see that the opposition to Hitler was weak and divided, and he was gradually losing hope, like he was on life support. and even to this day, like Dr. John MacArthur and the late Dr. R.C. Sproul's, and I have published a book called The Reformation Cannot Be Over, but they all kind of agree that the Reformed Church and the Reformed theology, which happened as a result of Martin Luther posting his 95 indictments or thesis against the Roman Catholic Church in 1517, launched the historic 16th century Protestant Reformation. And Dr. MacArthur and Dr. Sproul and myself all believe that the Reformation cannot be over. It's continuing, and Christ is calling even our present day church in the 21st century to reform. And you could actually read the first 3 chapters of Revelation and see that Christ is calling for reformation too before he returns. And with that being said, my book that was published was The Reformation Cannot Be Over. But we must admit, though, the Reformation or the Reformed Church is on life support. It's like how Dietrich Bonhoeffer and the Christians that wouldn't apostatize with Hitler in Germany was like. See, Bonhoeffer says that the opposition to Hitler was weak, and that's where the Reformed Church in the world today, it's not weak and divided, it's single in its resolve, has a single resolve that the Reformation cannot be over, and it's continuing until Christ returns. And he was gradually losing hope. In other words, he seemed to be like on life support, but they say that kind of the Reformation movement might be on life support too, that it might not be as strong today as it was in the 16th century. But we all know that the Reformation cannot be over. And here it says that anything positive could be done. He was losing hope that anything, Bonhoeffer in Germany was losing hope that anything positive could be done. No doubt, countless others, both German and Jew, saw the same thing. By 1933, Hitler was moving swiftly toward the legalized murder of the disabled, including those who suffer from epilepsy, considering them, like the Jews, to be a drain on Germany. Their extermination would begin in earnest by the end of the decade, back in the 30s. There were some who wondered why Bonhoeffer didn't join the German Christians in order to work again against them from within. See, Nazi theology maintains and defined Christianity. The more German you were, the more Christian you were. And so, again, some wondered why Bonhoeffer didn't join the German Christians who had apostatized with the Nazi theology in order to work against them from within. Well, he was involved in an invisible secret network, even of some of Adolf Hitler's generals, to assassinate Adolf Hitler. He refused, saying, "If you board the wrong train, it is no use running along the corridor in the opposite direction." After 3 weeks of work on the Bethel Confession, Bonhoeffer sent it to 20 theologians for their review and comments. By the time they were through, let me put this other pair of glasses on. These magnify the print a little bit larger. I hate sounding fragmented in my presentation to you. Yeah, that's a little bit better. By the time they were through, every bright line was blurred, every sharp edge of difference filed down, and every point blunted. Bonhoeffer was horrified at his fellow Christians' unwillingness to take a definite stand. They had effectively watered down the confession. Instead of the Apostles' Creed, I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, it was, I believe in the Führer Adolf Hitler, and we worship him in the place of God the Father, his Son, and his Holy Spirit. And they would re-edit everything and rewrite everything that the Bible was saying, especially, and then they would include the Mein Kampf, the writings of Adolf Hitler, and kind of accentuate the truths of what he believed to be true in the Mein Kampf, and how you should let the Führer or Adolf Hitler supplant Christ in the hearts of people and worship him as God. As Hitler was moving ahead with his own plans for the church, and despite the stacked odds against him, Bonhoeffer threw himself into the young Reformation movement. After choosing candidates, Bonhoeffer and his students wrote campaign leaflets and duplicated them. But on the night of July 17th, before the leaflets could be distributed, the Gestapo broke into the Young Reformation's office and confiscated them. The so-called German Christians had found legal objections to the way the Young Reformation movement listed its candidates, and the Gestapo was dispatched to put a stop to it legally by confiscating the leaflets. The Gestapo threatened Bonhoeffer with being sent to a concentration camp if the leaflets were anywhere distributed. It was at this time also that Hitler showed that he knew how to deal with the Catholics too. He announced that a concordant had been forged between the German Reich and the Vatican. The question is really Christianity or Germanism. And the sooner the conflict is revealed in the clear light of day, the better. Bonhoeffer's chief goal in writing the Bethel confession was to spell out the basics of the true and historic Christian faith, of which Martin Luther had a living legacy of his established Lutheran Church during the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, which consisted with Ludwig Müller, facile and twisted so-called Nazi theology. In addition to publishing the Bethel Confession, Bonhoeffer attended 2 ecumenical conferences in Bulgaria and Novi Sad and Sofia. These were different cities that he had these conferences in, circulating pamphlets to fight off parts of Hitler's Aryan paragraph that wanted to expel Jews from Europe, with regard to the church and the Jewish question. Also, other synods were held with regard to the free and confessing church, drawn to the idea of split from the apostatizing German church with its twisted Nazi theology. The ecumenical movement was an ally to Bonhoeffer, the American and European associations, but as with his allies in the German church, the ecumenical movement was usually unwilling to follow his radical line. Now, because he held one of those conferences in Bavaria, Bavaria is a small country just south of the German border, and 300 years ago, that was back like in the 1700s. This is where the idea of a one world government called Luciferianism, Satan has its head, was first conceived by people that lived in. They held conferences and began this New World Order thing, but that is not new. It goes back about 300 years ago. As far as what's happening, they say now, a lot of that was espoused in Bavaria 300 years ago. But really, there was kind of like a world government when Christ was here with the Roman Empire. And as you know, the Pharaoh in Egypt during Moses' day, he was the world power. So this was not new in the first empire to want to rule in this world. Kings and kings will rise and fall, kings and kingdoms, but Christ will always remain the King of kings and Lord of lords. Bonhoeffer attended a national synod and at Wittenberg, where Dr. Luther had famously inaugurated the Reformation. By now, 2,000 people had signed the manifesto of the Pastors' Emergency League, but even then, Bonhoeffer and his few found themselves the lone voices, even among their allies in the Pastors' Emergency League. Hitler announced that Germany was leaving the League of Nations. That was before the United Nations. There was a League of Nations that was started during World War I's end, and President Woodrow Wilson, the League of Nations, and it laid the groundwork for the United Nations right now. He cannily announced that he would let the German people decide the issue in a plebiscite. He knew plebiscite is a German word for like an election. He knew what the outcome would be, especially since the Nazis controlled all of the media and money in Germany. It was a heady time for the Nazis. The day after the plebiscite, the German Christians decided to celebrate by staging a massive rally in their favorite arena, the Berlin Sports. It's a German word. Sportspalast. It's like the Silver Dome. You know what the Silver Dome was here in Michigan? The Sportsplatz was a German word, like it was a big, arena in Berlin. And the Great Hall was festooned with Nazi banners of the Twisted Cross, the swastika, and their flags, and they called their Nazi theology the brown cloth theology, because all of the Nazis had like a brown, kind of like a light brown Nazi cloth, brown cloth, with the swastika armbands that they wore. And it was fashionable for men to wear a mustache like De Fuhrer too. A lot of the men wore the mustaches that looked like Hitler too. Who better to face this growing great evil of the 20th century, which was less than 80, 90 years ago, than a humble man of faith, as I have been describing to you in this program of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Like I said, their movement in Nazi Germany might have been on life support, but it did have an effect to counteract what the Nazi regime was doing to Martin Luther's German Lutheran Church, and has Adolf Hitler and the Nazis seduced a nation, bullied a continent, and attempted to exterminate the Jews of Europe. A small number of dissidents and saboteurs worked to dismantle the Third Reich from the inside. One of these was the polished German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was a pastor of the confessing church, Christian church in Germany, that did not apostatize with Nazi theology. And his Bible college had to be underground. And all his little movements that he was involved in, the leaflets and the tracts, like I said, the Gestapo confiscated them and threatened him that as the Nazism was beginning to grow and anti-Semitism to rid not only Germany but Europe of all the Jews, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was trying to counteract this by what he was doing, and the Gestapo threatened him, if you don't stop this, we're going to have to put you in a concentration camp. And they'll force labor you. You'll be forced with labor and giving very little to eat, and you'll become like a skeleton with just a little bit of flesh on you. And this is how they treated them people in them death camps. And eventually they all did die from being undernourished and overworked. And he wanted to get these dissidents and saboteurs because they were trying to dismantle the Third Reich from the inside. When there was an aborted bombing attempt to kill Adolf Hitler, that's when he really reached out before the war ended and killed everybody that was in that network and their families. One of these was Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a pastor and author known for such spiritual classics as The Cost of Discipleship, because when he was in these prisons, he wrote in German The Cost of Discipleship and Life Together, and then they translated them in our time into English, and now they're kind of bestsellers in Christian literature. And then he helped also the incarcerated death camp inmates not to be scared of dying, because they were all fearful, but he, knowing the Lord, had a way to comfort them and help them feel comfortable with death and to embrace it, because Dietrich was telling them, well, don't worry what they can do to you, because the Bible says to be present in the body, you can't be present with the Lord. You've got to be absent from your body to be present with the Lord, and embrace death, because to die is gain. And then he would comfort all the inmates who were really trembling in fear of what they were going to do to them in the death camps. So God used him in those excruciating circumstances too, to help the ones who were dying feel good about dying. And I'm sure the Jews that were being put in ovens and burned at Dachau, and that were being hung and put in gas chambers, were wondering, we as Jews, what have we done to deserve this? Because they were watching their own beloved wives and grandparents and children right in front of them be carried away to this torture, to these torture chambers of the Third Reich. And like I said, Dietrich Bonhoeffer and his few tried to counteract, because he said that when you touch the Jew, you're touching the apple of Yahweh, or Father God. That's the Hebrew name for Father God up in heaven. You're touching the apple of his eye when you touch the Jew, because he chose the Jews to attach his name to, like Abraham, the way the Arabic calls Abraham, and even the Muslims call him Father Abraham, was called the first Hebrew. And as you know, Abraham was also the genetic father of Ishmael and many of the Arab nations. And you can read this in the Muslim holy book called the Quran. And so the Muslim mosque probably would not be tolerated in Nazi Germany either, So here, one of these, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a pastor and author, known as much for such spiritual classics as The Cost of Discipleship and Life Together, has for his 1945 execution in a concentration camp for his part in the plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. In the first major biography of Bonhoeffer in 40 years, New York Times best-selling author Eric Metaxas takes both stands of Bonhoeffer's life, the theologian and the spy, and draw them together to tell a searing story of incredible moral courage in the face of monstrous evil in a deeply moving narrative. Metaxas is also on Christian Network TV with a half-an-hour program, and he is the the late conservative Rush Limbaugh, who died around the time of the presidential election of 2020. He was an anchor of a radio program too, Eric Metaxas, and he's still on TV with his presentations, Christian Networking, and he's on the radio, and he's the one that wrote this book, Eric Metaxas. And what I wanted to do is just share some of the excerpts of because the book is voluminous, it's like 700 pages, but I just wanted to share some of the excerpts that would give you insights into actually
2 minutes, Richard. 2 minutes.
All right, actually what was going on in the last 2 minutes. I just wanted to reiterate to you that the 15th annual Flint Prayer Chain Day event is going to be taking place September 18th, which is a Saturday at noon. But because of COVID restriction guidelines by Governor Gretchen Whitmer, we're going to all meet. We're going to stay in our cars to be safe. And we're going to, like last year, meet behind the City Hall in the parking lot. You can see the police station from there too. And we're all going to drive through and have a prayer parade drive-through city event like we did last year. And the event will dismiss after we drive through the city. I remember last year because we were driving down North Saginaw Street, and we got up by the late former Bishop Floyd's Church, New Jerusalem, at Carpenter Road, and you could smell that catfish cooking out of Woods Fish Market. And then we went back down to the City Hall. And in the last minute, I want to remind you to, if you can that day, Saturday at noon, we'll meet you all in the back of the City Hall in the parking lot for this historic event to take place again, calling Flint and all of its faith community to lock arms together and continue to pray for the great revival that will take place right here in Flint, Michigan, and go to the rest of the world in revival fire. Well, this is your friend Dr. Richard Allinger of the Newburgh Theological Seminary saying to you all, I was made in Flint and proud of it. Bye-bye.